Wilfrid Obeng. Welcome to the podcast.
Anavi, thanks for having me.
CTO of AudioMob. And for those who are not familiar with AudioMob, let me see if I get this correct. I should get this correct. Audio ads. Your last round valued your company at $100 million. You got some really great investors, Lightspeed, Makers, Supernode. You're the co-founder and CTO. The company was started in the UK. And then you guys dispersed. So Chris went to New York and you came to Abu Dhabi to build your engineering team out of Abu Dhabi. So talk to me about, like, let's say last 12 months. You were on a podcast, or was it Chris on a podcast maybe 2 years ago? Yeah. But what has happened during like the last 12 months with AudioMob?
Yeah, I think, it's been a long journey.
Yeah.
So good to see you in Abu Dhabi.
Yeah, thank you.
And yeah, a lot has happened. So basically what we've been focused on is really scaling. So we, as you said, we've raised a couple rounds now of funding, and now really what we did with that money was basically building out the product. So end to end, as you said, it's bringing in-game audio ads into, bringing audio ads into games and apps. And the reason we're doing that is I think we can all agree the current monetization methods aren't necessarily the best in terms of, if you compare the experience of a video ad blocking you to being able to listen to audio while not being disrupted and not actually interrupting the game.
Yeah.
It kind of makes a lot of sense. And I think before people were a bit skeptical of it, but I think now people realize actually when we look at retention and when we look at the ability to monetize and not having to always have a trade-off of, how many video ads can I put before I basically start losing users? Yeah. And you actually have a format where you can actually place more of these ads, and it's less of that trade-off of how many of these can I place before I start losing users. So I think what we've seen over the past 12 months is really actually a shift in that adoption. It went from more of us going out and pitching and actually us getting more inbound from studios. So I think that's a really good sign that people are looking for other ways. I also think it does help, though, that in terms of monetization, it's getting more difficult. Yeah. Just declining eCPMs, etc. So I think that's also helped, and also the privacy laws has also helped, especially for the growth of audio ads, because with audio, they're kind of used to not having that hyper-personalized information, so they're not as precious, if you like, of having it. So we see like stable eCPMs throughout that period of time, rather than declining eCPMs.
Yeah, and I mean audio ads is it makes sense because given your current current in-app ad selection, when you add audio ads, it doesn't take away from anything else. Yeah. So it's like an add-on. We know that it's not as great as a video ad in terms of driving revenue, but it doesn't take away anything from any other ad format. You get rewarded by listening, so you need to have headphones. People are like, who has headphones? Everybody has headphones on their head. And then so it's opt-in, you listen, you get a reward in the game. Yes, the call to action is not the same as in video ad, where they fool you on pressing that button. You're like tapping on like, where's the X? So I get it, but it's clearly a product market fit, and with product market fit comes scaling, as you said. Yes. Like, what does your organization look like these days?
Yeah, so we actually have 19 people now in our Abu Dhabi office. So we've grown obviously considerably from a Series A, where it was just literally me and Christian bootstrapping, and then one engineer on a contract, to now a fully fledged team in Abu Dhabi, led by our head of engineering. So we've definitely been able to build that structure out, and also with the help with partners like Google, obviously that helps. Yeah. Obviously called in a couple of favors from my ex colleagues at Google, but they've definitely been really, really helpful in actually helping us craft that. Because as you said, how do you scale? And gaming is global, and this is where I think actually building companies that are the infrastructure for gaming is, some people don't realize, is actually very difficult, because there's 3 billion gamers and they're across the whole world. Yeah. So it's like you can never fully keep everyone happy, especially when you're in the infrastructure play, because everyone's like, okay, that's great, you got me revenue in America, in Germany, the UK, Canada, South Africa, but they're like, yeah, but I've got, 20 million users in Vietnam that I need to be also monetized. You're like, okay, now I need to fly to Vietnam and try and find some audio advertising partners that we could work with there. So I think it's like a never-ending trail, like to always try and
startup.
Find views. Agreed.
So your background is opposite of a startup. Goldman Sachs, Google. Like how did you end up becoming a startup CTO?
I think it's a good question. I think I've always wanted to start my own company, even when I was really young. I actually found like like, you know, when you did applications or like things like scholarships and stuff, where I always would say like, oh yeah, I want to have my own company. And it's really interesting to read it back and you're like, oh, actually, I always did kind of have this little thing.
You were psyching yourself as a kid.
Exactly, psyching yourself as a kid. But I also was to be fair, I was very realistic in the fact that nobody, well, actually I shouldn't say nobody because there's definitely examples of the opposite of what I'm about to say. But I think it's a lot easier, if I'm honest with you, to gain that credibility when you do have those companies and you have that experience. It's not just having like the shiny, badge of working at companies. It's actually that experience in those companies. Because I think a lot of people look at it and go, actually, if you were at Goldman Sachs, for example, you're probably used to high pressure environment. You're probably used to people on tight schedules. You're probably used to like very sharp communications. And that's not a bad thing. That's actually, it means that there's some kind of like
aggressive culture.
Default
aggressive.
Yeah, but also stability, and it's almost like a baseline that you know that actually there's probably a baseline here. And I actually think doing banking before going to Google was a good thing, because when I was at Google, it gave me a lot of structure. So it's, even though I loved them going to Google environment, which is like the polar opposite, which is like everyone is like left in their own devices, and like, you have this project, we trust you to do this project, you are capable and smart enough to do this project, we wouldn't have hired you if you weren't capable and smart enough to do this project,
and you won't stay if you're not capable of handling this project.
And all of those things are kind of said to you at the beginning, and like you're left to do it, and there's that working environment. But I do think having that banking structure on top of that meant it was a lot more efficient in that role. So it actually meant that I appreciated that actually someone's leaving, that there's no one checking in on me all the time. Someone's left me to do it, but they trust me, let me deliver it.
Yeah.
Because that is really important. Like, let's really actually deliver on this.
So two very different management styles.
Exactly, yeah.
And were you leading teams at either of the organizations?
No. So I think this is a great segue into like, then how do you then, someone who's never led a team, then go and start trying to lead people? So I think this is where I took a lot of mentoring and coaching. So I have like
that's a very forward thinking.
Yeah, so I've had mentors since I was like 16 years old.
Oh wow!
And they've Atia and Joy. They have been amazing. They already have their own leadership and development company, and they kind of took me under their wing. And I was very rough. Obviously, I was like a 16-year-old kid. I was rough around the edges.
Who is it?
Yeah, I didn't know what was what.
A robot. If you're not.
Yeah, exactly. But they were really helpful in every step of the way. Like, even with the interview practice, like for Goldman Sachs, like what they would do is they'll be like, we're going to interview, we're going to pretend we're the interviewer, and like, you're going to answer these questions.
Scenario work.
Yeah, they're like, you're going to answer these questions. But it prepares you for any of these questions that you get asked, because you don't feel uncomfortable in interviews. I actually remember never feeling uncomfortable.
Yeah.
I always felt like, yes, a curveball will come up, but I'll have a way to answer it.
Yeah.
And I think that's where I've learned a lot from that practice, and that being grilled by people. And they were really direct and like really like
give me an example.
And sometimes like ruthless with the question. Like I would give them like a list of, here's some of the questions. They would just start throwing in curveballs. They'll be like, so yeah, but what happens if this way that you've said that you'll solve the problem doesn't work? Like what would you do then? And this is not part of the script. Obviously. They're like, you have to answer that. And those kind of things, I think, really build your resilience to curveballs that happen, as you said, in any company. Because you realize things don't go how you think they're going to go, ever. And you have to be comfortable. I always call it, you have to be comfortable with the startup roller coaster. It's like 1 week you could have the greatest news ever, and then the next week you could have the worst news ever. And it's just a constant roller coaster of just ups and downs until, like you said, as everyone knows, it levels out. Yeah. And then that's when you really start to take off.
This podcast is brought to you by AppsFlyer. In today's digital world, understanding your app's journey from discovery to download is more than just insightful, it's essential. Enter AppsFlyer, the leader in mobile attribution and marketing analytics that allows you to measure the full potential of your marketing efforts, making every ad dollar work smarter. With AppsFlyer, that's your new reality. Dive deep into data-driven insights that reveal exactly where your users come from and how they'll interact with your app. AppsFlyer, where your app's potential meets performance.
And how does that's so awesome. Like you got mentored that prepared you for the future challenges rather than normally what happens. Like for me, for example, I get mentorship when I'm already in shit. Listen, some mistakes happen. How do I get out of this? Like that's a normal scenario. Like you don't know what you need until you need it, but you kind of were forward thinking. How did mentorship help you then throughout your career? Like you were still working with the same mentors as you were at Goldman. You're still working with the same mentors at Google. Like how did that help you expedite your growth?
I think it was critical. Honestly, I think it's critical because I still have them now, and like they've come to Abu Dhabi, done leadership training sessions
Wow.
with our team. Yeah, they really, and the team's met them.
What are they called?
The two people.
Yeah.
Oh, Atia and Joy.
Okay, we'll
And
put
they-
in a link, right?
yeah,
They have a okay.
Yeah. They have a leadership development company called Enemo. So, and they were really fundamental in, as you said, at every step, giving that coaching advice of like, no, now you're going to be leading people. You have to think about this. You have to think about also putting yourself in other people's shoes.
Yeah, empathy.
Empathy. But also, and I think more importantly than in sometimes, I know it's kind of cliche, everyone always says empathy, but also I think what is underrated is also communicating what you're currently doing and like why it's important, and also communicating to the team that there might be higher priorities that you're dealing with. Because I think this is also something in a startup that you see where a lot of people who come from big corporates, they're very used to escalating things. It's like everything's an escalation. And this is where I found that the two cultures, I actually found that between banking and like big tech, is like we actually realized somewhere in between is where you need to be. Like you have to have that kind of structure, but we also need to be able to let people, like trust people to basically execute. And I think that's something I learned, that communicating that better to the team, because a lot of the time I'll be expecting them to do what I would do. It's like, yeah, but that problem, like you should be able to just find a solution to it. Like we're a scrappy startup, like just find a solution. And you'd find a lot of the times people would be like trying to escalate and like, well, I don't have time to like deal with this escalation. Like this isn't really an escalation when you're talking about the high level, like capital raising, you're talking about building a team, you're talking about getting more clients, you're talking
Strategic
about
work.
Strategic work. And I need to focus on strategic work. I can't be dealing with, someone's integration needs to basically be reviewed, and there's some questions. I'm like, well, we should as a team be able to handle that. But I think what I wasn't doing well was communicating that better in terms of, guys, you need to own this. Like this is your remit to own, and this shouldn't be escalated as high as the founders of a company. Like otherwise we're not going to be able to scale that once we get to even bigger velocity.
This is fascinating. So many avenues to go here. What have you maybe learned? Because you were prepared and you got coaching all along as you're building your team. You're starting alone. It's pretty simple. You bring a couple of guys or gals. I'm assuming engineers. Most of your team is men probably. It's easy because you're in the same room. You get the same vibe. You're in this beautiful office in Abu Dhabi Creative Hub. Communication is easy. But then you start scaling from 10 to 15 to now almost 20. What were the sort of learnings as you're going through this?
Yeah, I think the biggest learning, and I think our head of engineering, Ville, I can't take credit for it. He did a very...
Where is he from?
Finland.
Yeah. That sounds like it.
Yeah. So he's been fantastic in terms of setting a performance culture, and he was very clear from this about the start. When he came, he goes, I want to do this in a way that is very clear. It's very fair. There is no room for interpretation. We have to deliver with this level of accuracy, with these kind of timelines, and commit to these kind of goals and objectives. And he made that very clear to the team, and I think he's done a great job of scaling the team in that way. So there's never been this kind of idea of, like these certain things aren't necessarily fair. It's like, well, let's refer back to the metrics of what we agreed as a team, and these are the performance metrics that we should hold ourselves to. So I think he's been great with actually setting that in the team and allowing the team to really grow, and also take ownership as well of what they own. And I think we're very clear on like the performance metrics of what's required of the team in terms of like for promotion, when it comes to also changing in their goals and what their role remit is, because we also have like we have a track for people who just want to be subject matter experts. Like not everyone has to be a
individual
manager.
contributors.
Exactly. I'm a firm believer. I don't think everyone needs to be a manager. I actually think it's very difficult.
Very bad.
Yeah, I actually think it's very difficult as well. I think people just think, oh, I just tell people goals, but it's like, no, you really have to.
There's only one way up when there's actually two.
Exactly.
Specialist or manager.
Especially for engineers. And I think that's also something I learned from Google, because at Google we had that, like you had really, like you just had subject matter experts at Google, but it's just the whole thing they'll do is this, they know Java like expert level, and people can go to them for coaching. So I think that's something I did take, because I realized it makes a lot of sense, rather than forcing someone who's expert at Java who doesn't want to manage people to start managing people.
No, that's crucial. A lot of that you mentioned is like you essentially have a culture of performance and ownership, which is, sounds great. How do you instill that type of a culture in your engineering team? Because like when you read books, and I find that most leadership books have a heavy survival bias, and it doesn't make them bad, but you just have to take it into a grain of salt. And there they kind of talk about like how important it was to verbalize the culture, write it down, and do these things that are, document, which is very important as you're scaling and you can clearly communicate, because not everybody has access as the team grows to the leadership, and now they have to convey that message another way around. But has it been important for you, or is it something that is coming in the future? Because it seems like it's still kind of like undocumented culture that you have.
No, it's a really good point. I think in terms of culture, at the start, I will actually say I think we started too much on more of the big tech kind of culture. I actually think that's a learning, that we started too heavily on the big tech culture of leave everyone to their own devices. They should become owners, but you start to realize that works in big tech because there's so many guardrails. It's like everyone has their own thing, but technically you're still in a box, if that kind of makes sense, of this is your unit and this is your...
these are your resources.
Yeah, this is your exactly. Whereas we all know in startups that's not the case. You could be doing 3 roles at the same time, like 10 hats at the same time.
That's 3 is little.
Yeah, exactly.
Easy day.
It's easy day. So I think that's where we started to realize, oh no, we that's when I said we actually need to move a bit more actually to the structure of having this. And I think, how do you actually model that? I think you can communicate a lot. I do think I think people do say that, like, oh, communicate this a lot. But I think if you have a lot of people who come from a different environment, everyone claims they understand what a startup environment is. I would say it's in the 5% who really actually understand what a startup environment is. Like, they actually what it takes to basically, as you said, juggle 10 hats at the same time and be comfortable with it. That's the difference. Like, be comfortable, and being comfortable in the unknown. Like this, what I'm coding right now might just be completely obsolete in 2 weeks' time. Because nobody actually wants to use it, and we're just gonna scrap that and move to something else. But there's a lot of people who will do it, but being comfortable is a different story. And I tell you that because if you're not comfortable, it kind of can end up leading to like resentment of, oh, I built all of this and now it's gone to
mismanagement.
Waste.
This is mismanaged. The leadership doesn't know what they're doing.
Exactly.
Because we're going left and then we're going right. I'm used to having like a roadmap for the next 3 years.
Exactly. And
if they don't have a roadmap, they must be stupid.
Exactly. But that is exactly the difference between, as you said, a big corporate and a startup, because you're meant to be iterating. You're meant to be changing, and you're meant to be going where the data shows you should be going. That's what you're meant to be doing. And it's really difficult to say, like, almost to reprogram people to do that. So what we've had to do is, I think, more importantly than communicating is also to model it. And that's why you need those kind of people who are actually used to being startup environments. And I think that's one great thing about, not one great thing, it's another great thing about actually Vili, because he came from startups.
Where did you come from?
So he was at Bonusway, and then he was also at Smartly.
Smartly, yeah.
And they
SaaS.
So they understand this whole
customer SaaS.
Customer SaaS. And it's data driven.
Yeah.
What does the
customer SaaS,
What does the customer want?
Yeah.
And so once you have that model now, it's like, no, this is normal. We are going to build this, and we're going to build it based on data. If it doesn't work, we're going to change it.
This podcast is brought to you by AppsFlyer. In today's digital world, understanding your app's journey from discovery to download is more than just insightful. It's essential. Enter AppsFlyer, the leader in mobile attribution and marketing analytics that allows you to measure the full potential of your marketing efforts, making every ad dollar work smarter. With AppsFlyer, that's your new reality. Dive deep into data-driven insights that reveal exactly where your users come from and how they interact with your app. AppsFlyer, where your app's potential meets performance. Do you communicate this uncertainty?
In which way? So in terms of the product roadmap? Or the way...
How do you prepare people that what they're doing might be a waste of time?
Good question.
Waste of their time.
Yeah, waste of their time. I think that part is over communication. That's where you have to I always stress about A/B test. Mm-hmm. We need to test this. We need to see if it, and I'm like, this might not work. We need to listen to what the clients want. Like, this is our interpretation of what we need to do, but we need to know that in 2 weeks we might just need to change this or fit it. And to be fair, a lot of the time it's like you might just need to adjust. It's not necessarily that everything is just gonna change, but it's usually just course correcting. So, and I also explain that if you do enough course correcting, you don't need to do a whole pivot, and that also saves you actually sometimes. So it's like
adjusting.
Yeah.
And I think when you adjust, you don't have to pivot.
Yeah.
Sometimes you have to pivot.
Yeah. But sometimes you do have to pivot.
Yeah, if your whole business model sucks, then you're done.
You're done. Yeah.
Okay, so and that's a very interesting point. I've kind of learned it as of late of setting my expectations correctly, and that leads you to not have emotional reactions about things. So, I might be working with certain entity that I know that their plans are changing so much, and if you expect that yes, it will be this today, then in the evening it will be a little bit different, and then in the morning we're going to go in that direction. If you understand that this is how they work, this is the appropriate, then you don't get upset when these quick adjustments happen, because that's the way of working. Mm-hmm. But how do you, where do you hire your engineers, and how do you need to train them that we are a startup, and in a startup, even though we have a product market fit and we have clients and we are scaling and we are, our sales is going up and all the good things are happening, but we're still not there. We're not like we have Instagram and essentially all we do is look at what TikTok is doing and no, I'm just kidding. But you can't make a roadmap on something that already exists, because you're one of the few audio ad companies. So you're trailblazing, trying to figure out what this is in the future without having an example out there. So that makes it hard for you to predict the future.
Yeah, I think you're right, and I think this is why I also don't believe in startups when you see this 5-year roadmap. I'm like, I don't. As a technical person, I just don't understand it.
It's for investors.
Of course, but I think if you're real understanding as an investor, you should understand that. And I think most of the really strategic ones understand that. It's if I see 5 years, it's 1 year is you're already going to be changing things to fit what the sales are happening, right? You have to do that. But I think to answer your question, we hire our engineers from all over the world, and I think that's one really good thing about being here in Abu Dhabi, because you're able to hire from anywhere basically. So we have engineers from Finland, as I mentioned, from India, from the UK, from Bulgaria, from Pakistan, everywhere.
Easy to hire here?
Easy. And so I think that's one of the beauties of it. It's easy to get the visa process done. They can turn around the visa process in 2 weeks.
Oof. So really?
Yeah.
The golden visa one?
Oh, no. They're just a normal standard employee
visa. For people listening, golden visa is essentially a green card.
Yeah, similar, yeah.
And normal is that your stay in a country is normally tied to your employment with this employer context.
Yeah. It's really easy to turn around. So that's really been helpful in getting engineers over and hiring the talent. Also, it definitely helps, and this was always part of the plan of moving an engineering office here. When you're competing with Google and Facebook and Meta now, it's very difficult to get these engineers with the salaries they're on. But to be able to say that they can come somewhere that's safe, sunny, tax-free, definitely helps when it comes to actually getting the talent in. And I've seen this with a lot of our engineers. It's when they realize that those three things, even when we first moved, it was quite interesting. When I mentioned all of these perks and all the stuff that you get being here, that was one of the reasons that we will move from the UK to actually come here.
do people come here to check it out before they move? Like, what's the profile of the people that you relocate, apart from them being engineers? Are they, in their 30s or in their 20s or in their 40s?
Good question. It's a range. So we actually have people who relocate with their families as well. So like people who relocate with like their wife or husband and their kids. And then we also have people who are like in their 20s and 30s.
Singles.
Yeah, singles. And they will relocate.
They mingle here?
You got to ask.
That's something that you don't ask. No, I'm just joking. Single and ready to mingle. Yeah, it's just in the sense, like, I've been here for a couple of times now and talking to people. It feels like this is a very family friendly city.
Yeah.
Like Dubai is 15 minutes away. It's not that far. Yeah. But Abu Dhabi especially seems like a really family friendly one. So I'm just wondering, like, that's what I was asking is, like, how do different how do people in different stages of their life like the city or like being here?
Great question, actually. So I think it is definitely, I see what you're saying in terms of Abu Dhabi, in terms of safe. I feel like it's a good contrast and break from also like the London being super, super busy. So I actually like that. But I think there are opportunities for different kind of people. So I think for families, it's very obvious. Like there's so many things you can do here. Like there's so many like theme parks, water parks, malls, activities like the mangrove, all of this stuff, like the museums, like there's a lot of stuff. But I think actually you're right. A lot of people, when we're relocating, always ask like, what about the other stuff for like people who might not have a family yet?
Yeah.
And you're correct to say, but there are still things like, for example, I remember one of our engineers moved and already he was doing like whitewater rafting and stuff. And I was like, what? I was like, where did you find that? And he's like, oh, I just went on Google and I found that there's like whitewater rafting here. And I was like, okay, I didn't even know that. So, and then there's also like stuff like shooting, but there's also a lot of brunches actually in Abu Dhabi as well. I didn't even realize that. So even a lot of the engineers will go go to brunches in Abu Dhabi as well. So I mean, there are a lot of opportunities actually for people who might not have a family yet to actually, meet new people and actually move. The other thing is also interesting. There's also like cool fun stuff like we do as, I say we do, the engineers organize it themselves. Like they'll go and do go-karting. The whole engineering team will just go and race.
Next to the Ferrari wall, right?
Exactly.
Yeah.
So they'll just go and start doing stuff like that. And or like one of our R&D engineers, he does the cycling on the Yas track.
Yeah, the 30 kilometer track.
Yeah.
God damn it, that's a long one.
Yeah, he really is like he's training now for a big cycle. But so I think there is actually on the other side there is actually a lot that people who don't have a family yet to do here as well.
Yeah, the way I understood, talking to Boris, who's also in this office, CEO of Hypemasters, like finding a social circle is not difficult, but you have to find it. It won't find you. It's not difficult because there's so many expats here. Like I think 8 out of 9 is an expat. So there's a lot of people who came here, and through that they are looking for a new social circle. And so you just have to find what you're interested in, and around that is always a community, whether it's like triathlons or karting or shooting or brunches or so that one is a good part. And so you said you've been bringing people from all around the world. How does that affected your leadership style? Because Google is very international as Goldman. Like, has it had any effect as you becoming a leader and leading very different people from different backgrounds?
Elevate your game development with Heroic Labs, the cutting-edge platform for building multiplayer games. And you need an edge to be successful in today's gaming landscape. Their scalable Nakama server empowers you to create compelling, real-time multiplayer experiences effortlessly. Benefit from features like in-game chat, leaderboards, matchmaking, and more, all designed to enhance engagement and retention. Whether you're developing for mobile, console, or PC, Heroic Labs gives you the tools to bring your community together. Unleash the full potential of your game with Heroic Labs, where every developer is a hero.
I think one thing I've learned about this is, yes, but I think what we were trying to do is hire people and then install the culture. And what we've actually realized is we need to start instilling the culture. It sounds a bit weird, or preparing people for the culture, maybe it's a better way to say it, from the interviews. So immediately, like every interview, like it's either me or Christian on the end interview as the culture stage interview. And it's something that I actually do like push on in terms of like, this, just so you're aware, this is a startup. It is not a big corporate. There isn't going to be all of these facilities like that you might have had. And I say this as someone who came from those companies. So I'm not saying it in like a condescending way. I'm saying like, well, I used to be at Goldman Sachs. I used to be at Google. Like at Google, we had free breakfast, lunch, and dinner. You had a gym. You had slides. You had music rooms. You had sleep pods. So like I already know.
You don't have sleep pods?
No.
Tyrant.
So
no music rooms?
Exactly. So for people who I'm interviewing, I'm like, I already know the extreme of like how much stuff you could have, and this is not what that is yet. And even to be honest, Google in the first days was very scrap. Like it was a garage.
Yeah.
It was literally Larry and Sergey in a garage. So this is where like they came from this to being able to do all of those perks. But let's like reset ourselves that it did start in a very scrappy and like getting stuff together way. So I think those were the kind of things that really we try and hone in on in the interview stage to prepare people to understand like this is a startup, this is a performance culture. We also say that now in the interviews. And we didn't always used to say this in interviews, but now we're trying to better communicate that up front. Like this is a performance culture. So before you come here to realize that there's going to be some targets and objectives and a standard that we expect.
So it feels like you went from selling a company, which is like very dangerous, to actually trying to be super blunt and almost discouraging person from joining. Would that be not discouraging, but like listen, it's going to be hard. Yeah. It's going to be startup. Things are going to change. It's going to be chaotic. But the opportunities are great.
Exactly, and I think it's, to your point, it's like it's also I think also in some ways what we're trying to do is make sure that the candidate's the right fit, so that they don't also join and feel like, oh, I thought it was just going to be like, I have my own remit. There's no real structure. There is no stuff, and it was almost like it's going to be just all fun and rainbows and say, but that's not a startup. Like, if you want that, I always say to people, you should go to a big corporate, and it will be more stable, and it will be more static, and you get a level of consistency. But I think, as you said, with a startup, the whole idea is high risk, high reward, right? So if you're doing anything that's high risk, high reward, and I mean anything, like if you want to be a footballer, if you want to be in the UFC, that journey is always ups and downs. Like when you see it when like players get injured and they're crying on the pitch, like the reason they're crying is like they know this is going to mean they're not going to play for like, maybe 6 months or 3 months, or even sometimes like 3 weeks, but still it means they're not going to be there. So, but they understand it's like, oh, this is a low now, and then there's going to be another high. And I always say that. And I always used to think those high performance comparables were always cheesy. But then the more you start doing this, you actually start realizing, actually, a lot of stuff in business is very similar to the stuff in sports and in any other field, actually, in terms of when you want to be at the highest end of it, it takes a lot of, as you said, almost stoicism. Like you're actually trying to find a middle ground and never be too high or too low. You're always trying to balance that out.
So what are some of the specific questions where you're trying to understand whether that person is ready, not ready, whether that person is in the type of a stage of their life where they can enjoy a startup journey? I think that's the way of putting, because people change while life situation changes. There's a situation where the same person would thrive in a startup, and a situation in their life where they would feel miserable in a startup.
I think the number one thing I always say is being comfortable with the uncertain. I think that's the number one thing I'm looking for.
Is there questions that you try to find out, or do you just ask? Because it's like do you try,
Yeah, I think so. With the being comfortable with the uncertain, there are questions I do try and ask around like what people enjoy about their current company and their current role and what they don't like.
Ooh, that's a good one.
So it basically gives me an idea of, okay, if I know you don't like these kind of things.
I like our roadmap.
Yeah,
It's
yeah,
really
yeah.
well managed. The transparent. The project manager is so great.
Yeah.
I feel clarity in my work. I can just focus on doing. You're like,
It tells me, it's exactly what everything you just said. It tells me without telling me, like, okay, this
you're like
person
drawing an X.
but it's just this person is not a fit for,
Yeah,
like, it doesn't
it's a
make
fit for later.
Yeah, exactly. So, and I think that's a great way of putting it. It is a fit for later because at some point, every startup, as we've seen,
Becomes a grown-up.
Becomes a grown up. Yeah,
Or dead.
Yeah, or dead. I think that is a reality. People also need to understand as well. It is a reality. Is what you're joining is, again, high risk, high reward. It could also fizzle out, but that's obviously not the aim that someone has when they join the company.
And there are people, like, I think it was a Netflix culture book that was really interesting where they talked about that there are people in the early stages that they let go later on with, like, there's nothing wrong.
Yeah.
Like, you helped us here, but this is not a fit for you. And, like, this part of the journey has ended. We're not going to force you to, go the corporate route. All the recommendations to the next upstarts where you thrive in this chaotic building atmosphere. But now we're, like, bureaucratic. Big organization. I don't know how bureaucratic, but basically the culture has changed. So yeah, keeping that in mind that there's different stages for different phases.
No, I totally agree with you. I think, and I got this advice as well from a few people that that it's not necessarily the people that got to that stage will be the same people to get you to the next stage. And I think that does make a lot of sense, right? Because also what you also find with people who really love startups is, and because people want to talk about from the perspective of the business, actually, the people who really love startups sometimes just go, yeah, I don't want to do this anymore. And that's happened at Google. You saw a lot of the Google people, the initial team, went and started building their own things or went to another startup. They're like, no, I want to be in the uncertainty and strategy. I think to go back to the question you asked me before, it's also people who don't see it as a negative, but see it as thrill and excitement.
Yeah.
Of the answer, like, oh no, this is a big problem. We're gonna challenge it. We're gonna be able to conquer it. We're gonna be able to move and actually do it. And I think those are the kind of people you want in a way that they're either the visionaries or the people who want to get on board with that kind of big picture and vision thinking.
How do you compete for talent then? Because, like, as a startup, you can't match the salaries, you can't match the packages. You can offer the upside, which is highly uncertain, and then you can offer not a wild, but more a chaotic culture with a ton of ownership.
Yeah, I think that's where two things. I think one, on the practical level, government subsidies like here in Abu Dhabi help. I think on the practical, that's a more practical level. But I think on this second and more vision-based, I would say, and more ideals, like perspective is, it's more around explaining to people the vision and having people who really believe in the vision or having people who understand what the problem is and are like, actually, that makes a lot of sense. Yeah. I get it. I see where this scales. I can get on board with this journey. And I think that's what I'm also looking for in the interviews. Because I usually ask, like, so why exactly you want to work at AudioMob? And you always get a generic answer, like someone who's basically read the website and thinks, like, you can't tell that they just
you guys
read the
look
website.
cool.
Yeah, like,
it was really good. I like music.
Exactly. But and so I'm always digging deeper usually on that question. Yeah. Like I'm always like, okay, so what exactly about it? Do you play mobile games? Do you see stuff about audio? Like, why? Like, not this, 20 words response. Like, what is the actual reason? Because if you're not really, you're not really going to be infused when, as I said, this like stuff goes up and down, or roadmaps change, or this feature gets shelved. Yeah. So you have to be comfortable with all of that.
So basically, when they're excited about the journey, how have you changed, or not changed, because you didn't start as a leader, you've grown as a leader throughout this time. How have you changed during this time of like, having no employees to now having 19? Like, are there specific things that you could talk about?
Attention app and game developers. Are you ready to unlock the secrets behind the world's top performing apps and games? With Sensor Tower, you get the ultimate competitive edge, whether it's breaking into new markets, fine-tuning your UA strategies, or boosting monetization. Dive into data like never before. Track global trends across app stores. Analyze market-leading in-app purchase and in-app ad strategies. And benchmark your performance with real-time insight. The best part, Sensor Tower doesn't just deliver data, it helps you turn it into action. With intuitive tools and expert analysis, it's everything you need to make smarter, faster decisions. Thousands of app and game studios, from indie creators to global giants, trust Sensor Tower to help them win. So why not you? Start your free trial today at sensortower.com. That is sensortower.com.
Yes, I think I've really learned, and I think this is the other thing. I think a lot of times when you're on podcasts or you hear people talking about leadership, it's always like the leader always sounds like they're always 100% correct, and I think that's always a worrying sign. That's always a worrying sign for me. I'm like, it's impossible. If every human is fallible, so it doesn't really make any sense to be here pretending like you haven't made mistakes or you haven't learning. And I think that's also something that you need your employees to also give you that grace, and sometimes to be like, okay, actually, but to get that grace, you also have to admit like, oh yeah, this was a mistake and we shouldn't have done it this way, and we're now basically moving in this direction. And I think that also gives the employees, actually, they were quite honest in saying that, like, this was the issue, and they've given us a solution to the problem. So I think that's how you usually kind of get that that trust and also that grace. I think that's something I've learned. But I think more importantly, and I think even more important than the first point, is I've realized that there is no one size fits all, and this is why I say management is very hard. I actually understand. I had a manager at Google. He said this to me. He goes, one day you'll manage people and you'll understand how hard it is. And I always like had a laugh at this one. I was like, okay, interesting.
How hard can it be?
Yeah,
and then give me the corner office and we'll see what happens.
and then you do it, you're like, oh, I get it. And it's because one size doesn't fit all, and you have to basically adjust to the different personalities and manage them on a one-to-one basis.
Well, I'm asking this especially because, like, as you said, there's many different types of leadership, and as you're becoming a leader, you don't know what kind of suits you, and oftentimes you try to emulate somebody who you look up to, but you might not have all the context, or you might not even be the right person. And even if you look at sports, let's say like 3 top tennis players at certain time were Djokovic and Federer and Nadal. Yes, Nadal. Yeah. I'm not a big tennis fan, but I know like looking at them and how they prepare to a match, they're widely different. Like you got the stoic Serbian, you got the aggressive Spaniard who's like pumped up and then you got the Swiss guy who's just joking and jovial and kind of like, but those are their ways of handling stress, and then like that's how they are who they are, and that's how they're able, and they're not like it would be weird if Federer would be like super stoic or like getting aggressive, and the other way around as well. It's like that's their personality and they show it. And the same thing I kind of feel like has to be in your leadership style, where it has to be not that you like it is a role and it's very difficult role and with a lot of responsibility, but it would be also very weird where it would be like an act for you, where like I'm now a leader and I'm gonna act that is totally against who I am outside my working hours, because that feels unsustainable, right? Yep. And you go crazy.
And I think I agree with you, and I think that's also a big learning, because I think you're 100% correct. I think a lot of us emulate. No. Like you can watch a video like, you read a book, to your point. Yeah. Or the leadership book, and they always have this one way of like, you should be like this, and this is the modern way of doing it, and this was the old way of doing things. And
don't micromanage.
But and
don't be like that.
But this is where I do like I agree with your sports analogies. You really to your point, I learn a lot from sports analogies. Like when you listen to like coaches, like if you watch football, like if you listen to coaches like Jose Mourinho, where he would say, for this player, I would one-on-one coach them. For this player, I never said a word to them. For this player, I would tell them to come into my office on a Sunday and talk about this thing. For this, and you start realizing, and And you get like, these are the different ways you
Yeah.
have to talk to different people. Otherwise, it's just, you cannot function. And I think, as you said, the emulating is just tiring, because if you just trying to be this ideal leader, and then also nobody really understands your stance on how you think, I think that's important. And I think that's why we actually did a lot of like, what we actually did is, in our leadership, we did psychometric testing. So we have the profiles of everyone, and like how, basically what their personality type is and what they default to.
Yes.
It's not like saying this is them and this is what they are, but it's like what they default to. And so I can be very direct and analytical. Those are the two things I have. And what I try to do is also be transparent with that and say, look, the reason I want to be transparent is I want people to know, if you're going to come to me, it should be direct and analytical, because I don't want to respond to like a very fluffy email that just doesn't really tell me what the problem is and or what you need help with, because it's just so much text to read. I'm just like, okay, we're talking for half a page, but what is the actual? If you bullet point to me, it's probably going to be quicker for me to go yes, no, but I also understand. And I learned this at Google, because we used to have this thing at Google called go/no hello. So basically what it meant was, especially in engineering teams, is there was people who didn't really care about you. When we say no hello, it means like you don't have to do, oh, hi, how are you? How was your weekend? Because as engineers, most of the engineers, we didn't care. We're like, okay, what's the problem you have? Okay, here's a code sample for how to solve it. Oh, what's the problem? Oh, yes, no, that doesn't work. You can't do that. You have to, go to this repo. And it wasn't to say that. It was basically to let people know you're not offended if you just jump straight into what it is. Because
Direct communication.
it's just pinging. So I think that was something I also realized, actually, it became more and more important to me that I need to let people know that it's not necessarily that I will always adjust for you. You always have to know that if you're sending me something, make it direct and make it concise.
That's such an important point for leaders. Yeah, such an important point for leaders is like understanding yourself, and then not like, oh, I understand myself. This is me, and I'm gonna be like me. Like but like understanding sort of like what you respect and how you want to lead the organization. Because in the end, you're the founder, you're the leader. You need to build the organization around you, and not kind of like build yourself around the organization, because that would be very unsustainable. And how do you communicate like how do you want to drive your team? How do you want to lead? Is that in the beginning of the interview process, or like when they've been hired, or how do you tell the team?
Good question. And I think that's where I always say it's important in our interviews, especially like take the engineering example, like in the different interview periods, like I make sure they meet the different people in the team. So like they'll meet a member of the team, they'll meet the head of engineering, they'll meet me, and they'll also meet like usually like our office manager, who just gets a sense of it. And the reason I actually like Zakia, our office manager, being on the call is because obviously she interacts with everyone every day.
Yeah.
So it's like, will this person gel with all of these other people? Because she knows she's with them every single day in office. So it's like, oh, will this person actually gel? And she gives like a different opinion. It's not technical.
You also see how people behave with somebody who's not above them in the organization, because they might behave very differently.
And you'll be surprised. We've actually, and
I won't be. I've done this.
But I mean, in terms of what some of the candidates have said, like you like some people have said, I don't know why they were on the call. They're not senior. And I'm like, oh, red flag. Straight away, I'm like, red flag. What does that mean? Like, so basically, people who you think are too junior. So what happens if the intern joins? Yeah. You go tell the intern that they shouldn't be on anything, and they should
coffee.
And that kind of, it's the sense of, oh, you better than, and I do not like the sense of like you feel like you're better than someone.
That's a perfect analogy. That means they won't be able to take feedback from somebody more junior. Yeah. And that's a risk.
Yep. And I think that's also something I realized at Google, which was, I will say, was different from banking. Like, I'll never forget, like one of my first weeks, my manager said to me at Google, he was like, oh, so they was discussing like the strategy. And by the way, this was very senior, like people in the Google Cloud team, right? And I was the intern. Yeah. And I'm like, but Wilfrid, what do you think? My manager, I was like, I'm coming from banking. I'm like, why is he asking? Yeah. I'm like, I'm probably like 18, 19 years old. Yeah, what? And he goes, yeah, no. He goes, you're the fresh pair of eyes. You think like it'll be interesting because we're all been here for so long. What do you actually think? And I actually realized, this is why they were effective at building products, because you actually thought, we're not just hiring you for no reason. Like, give us what you think. Like, bring something, and you have to contribute as well. And I realized, okay, this makes a lot of sense, and they actually are trying to build. And I think that for me is more when people talk about inclusion. I think is more important. That's the most important thing, is the difference of opinions and the difference of regardless of where or how old they are, is actually taking it into and putting it into the mix and going, actually, let's build a mix that actually represents society.
Yeah, that's the inclusiveness part. Yeah. That's true. That was, again, like referring back to the Netflix culture book. What was it? No rules. They have that type of approach, and they were kind of highlighting even more of like, that was typical for a junior to even challenge a manager in a meeting. And they were like, let's celebrate that, because when somebody higher up makes a mistake, that mistake is so much more expensive than somebody on an intern level makes a mistake. And oftentimes it's reverse. Like, people watch people below them, but not as much is given to the feedback from, not a feedback, but just even a call out. It's like, hey, this is not working. Hey, I think this is a mistake. But again, when it's done correctly, when it's relevant, when it's constructive, with a good intent, then that type of feedback makes all the sense. And have you built any kind of have you invested time in any kind of a culture book, so that comes later?
Oh, you mean, like a cultural, you mean
like a employee memo or that kind of
so we do have an employee handbook, but I think you should have one. But how often people refer to it, I think, is a whole other story. By the way, I don't even mean in big corporate. Google had one. Mm-hmm. I don't know how many people actually refer to it. Goldman has one. I don't know how many people actually refer to it. And that's why I agree with what you said before, where living it and modeling it is more important. I think modeling actually is probably not even living it. Modeling it is actually more important.
That's so true. That's in gaming. Like, there are some iconic, or in tech as well, like the Netflix culture deck, or gaming like the Valve's book, and Supercell has one, but those cultures seem to be living it, and it's very important for them. There's one thing of doing it. It's like values. You can come up with really cool ones. You can write them. You can follow all the rules. But if you don't, live by them, then they're meaningless in that sense. Do you find that it's important to verbalize, like to write them and document them early on, or is there a stage where you're like, okay, now we're moving from 50? In your case, like for a team of 100 people, to now like scaling to 200, 300, and now we really have to start documenting, because you just can't scale everywhere.
Yeah, I think this is a learning as well. I think definitely documenting, it's a really difficult one. I find it so difficult. It's like, I don't actually know, and I'll be honest, this is something, I think you have to be honest sometimes and say, I don't actually know the best time to start documenting. Yeah. Because I think
too early, it's like writing a diary. It's like, relax, dude. Like, you don't have an organization you can talk about.
Exactly. And I think
too late. It's like, shit, the culture is getting out of me.
I totally agree with that. But I have found, I do think, I'll say maybe at 25 you should have document. The reason why I say that is because when you're onboarding people, it becomes too difficult, because what happens is everyone has this this embedded knowledge that they have in their heads, and like you almost become like these tag teams. Like, if you're, especially when it's small teams, it's only 2 people. When I say tag team, it's like, so you're just off the bat, like, we know this because we've lived it. But when the new person joins, you actually start to realize, and you actually start to feel for them, and you're like at first you're like, why don't they get this? And then you go, oh, like, it's because we've been doing this for a year. Like, I mean, it's just one other person, and we just basically would just slack, like, oh, this. They don't have any of this context. And then you start to actually be more interested, like, okay, actually, we're being a bit too critical, actually, of this new person, because they have no idea, because it's not documented. So that's why I say, like, at 25, like, even 20, actually, I would say, there needs to be a framework. And all we just do is Notion pages, like, just to give a baseline. But the problem is also updating them in the start. And this is why I say it's really tricky. And this is why I always say I don't know, because it's very tricky in the start, because the other issue you have is things are moving so fast. Yes. You document it. 1 month later, like, actually, we changed the product. So, 4 of these things is actually incorrect. Yeah. But then the person joins, no one's updated it. They're like, so, this is how the product works. You're like,
but that's more about like ways of working.
Yeah.
They shouldn't be changing that much because it's more about like how do you perceive it. I remember I was listening to a podcast. It was called Founders Podcast. It's a really good one. He was going through the Mr. Beast's. I think you could call it culture book. And the good part about like the cool part about it, it really felt like he wrote it. Like he clearly did, but it was like so raunchy, so raw, so to the point, and just making people understand like we've been here for a long time, we've done all the mistakes. So that's why it's really important, kind of explaining all these little nuances. But you're absolutely right. And when you're in a startup, when you're traveling to Vietnam to secure clients, it's like the last thing that you want to think about is not the last thing you want to think about, but the getting into that mind stage of future looking and that kind of like almost Zen mode where you can write things down, how you really feel and so forth. It's very hard to change that mindset from this constant need to execute.
Yep. No, I totally agree with you. And I think that's the balance that's very difficult. And I think any founder, if they're honest, is one of the most difficult things because you're always on the vision level, always executing, always trying to move very fast, but then you're realizing that you have to bring everyone with you at the same time. And marrying the two is actually very difficult. And to your point, like when you're in Vietnam and you're trying to travel, like one thing I've stopped doing is like I just say, if I'm at a conference, just no meetings, because I did that founder thing where you try and go, oh, I can juggle both. Oh god, it's a disaster. To me, it's
juggle what, like meetings?
Like virtual meetings at the same time as being at conferences. Oh, I'm like, it's a disaster. I'm like, you just have to basically say all of the things, push them out, because it's either focus on the thing at hand or don't focus on anything. And that's what I've learned. Like that,
it's very hard.
I think maybe
because you have to run and find a place where it's quiet and it's a client meeting and you're like trying to this and you're just literally 3 minutes ago you're talking to somebody. Now you're changing a mindset to like, okay, I'm from this to this, and I'm from selling to discussing a problem to it's very, very difficult. Finally, I kind of wanted to ask you is like, how has it been? Like you moved from London, which is, bustling metropolis, to Abu Dhabi. Like, how has it been for you personally?
So yeah,
do you like living here?
Yeah, I love living here.
You lived here for years.
Yeah, for 4 years now. So I moved in 2020, and I think for me it's been great. One, it's always good to see the sun. That's the first thing. I think coming from London, born and raised in London.
Do you have family?
You mean family?
Like single or?
Oh no, I'm
like
single. So yeah.
Single.
Yeah.
Okay, interesting.
So yeah, it's been. I think for me also it's been great in terms of all the different activities.
Yeah.
I also think it's been great to relocate somewhere and have the focus. Another thing I think is great for me, just culturally, is, and actually my mentor said the same thing. They said, and it was when they came here, right? They said, I think it's really good that actually you have the business here because it's in a place which has grown at such a high velocity so quickly. It's almost like a startup. Like, and actually it's for people to then visualize that and see that every day. And also how quickly you see things change. Like new buildings get made, things growing, things expanding. New neighborhoods. And this is what I really agree with her on that point. I said, Joy, you're right actually. That is actually a very good observation. Like it actually shows people that there's actually a country moving at this velocity.
It's this is an interesting thing because like when you live in a big city like London or New York, it creates immense sense of possibilities, in one sense, because like there's the never-ending affluency, but then you also see the dark side of it where it creates that pressure, and I don't know, to me it kind of gets a little bit in that rat race type of a thing. But here you're kind of seeing just an up and up. Yeah. Because is that the case or like?
Yeah, no, I agree. I think to your point, right, and I think it's a good analogy. Like with London, you kind of see everything already built. And things are slower when it comes to like doing new developments. But I think here you see things moving so quick. Like if I was to compare when I first moved, like this hub wasn't here.
Yeah.
Like this, and then to compare it to now, like the velocity and how quickly things get built or things move is impressive. Like I can't use any other word, but it's very impressive. And I think that then acts as like I am a big believer in like visualization. So actually it acts like a visual kind of thing of look at what we can, look at what can occur.
Physical changes.
Yes.
And you'd be like, this island wasn't here.
Yeah, exactly. Exactly. So it shows you like as a beacon of what can happen when you focus and you actually execute. And I think that is a good signaler, actually. And I think as an entrepreneur, it is a good signal to see a lot of the time that this is what's possible. This is really what's possible.
Were you thinking about other locations apart from Abu Dhabi? Like how did you choose this over any other location for your engineering team?
Yeah, of course. So I think when I first came here, I was looking at all of the different free zones, like in specifically Dubai and Abu Dhabi. Actually, it was really funny. When I first came here, I was talking to Hub 71, who actually referred me to 2454. And it was really honest with me. He said, this is a really cool business. He goes, I would really want to take you into the Hub 71 cohort.
Hub 71 is in Dubai.
Yeah, no, in Abu Dhabi.
Abu Dhabi.
Yeah, but he said, I really want to take you to Hub 71 cohort, but he was like, this is gaming, media, and entertainment. He goes, I'm going to refer you actually to 2454 and that AD gaming team. So that's basically what actually got their first introduction here. And yeah, from that and having a conversation with the team is when I made that decision. There was a few reasons actually. One, it was a gaming, media, and entertainment hub. So I was like, this is makes a lot of sense for actually synergies, right? We can literally go downstairs and start pitching game developers and get them on board.
Yeah.
That makes a lot of sense. Also, the people who are already here, Ubisoft, Unity. So I was like, okay, this makes a lot of sense. Two, like the subsidies, the office location. I was like, I can sell this. That's the other thing. I was like, I can sell this to engineers.
This is a really modern office. Like
And
you got the Starbuckses and whatnot.
And engineers love this kind of stuff. And then next to it, you have the beach clubs, the all of the activities, the restaurants. So I was like, I can really get people on board with this. But I had to also buy into that vision because this wasn't made. None of this was here, but they showed me like this is what it's going to be, and I was like,
that's quite a leap of faith when somebody shows you pictures and be like, this is going to be here.
But you see, but do you know what's really interesting about that? I think the reason I believe that, I think there's not many places that I would actually, to your point, I would believe them. But when you see Abu Dhabi and you see Dubai and you see Sharjah and other Emirates, and you see how quickly that they've grown, and when I say quickly, I know people say it's like 30, 50 years, but that is relatively quickly for a country. Yeah. So when you see the velocity of which they've grown, when someone shows you that in 4 years there's going to be, you're like, probably. Honestly, I looked at it, I was like, yeah, probably. It will probably happen. So that's when they pitched it, I was like, okay, that makes sense. And I was like, okay, we will move the engineers gradually over. And then when it was built, that's basically why we then had a lot of confidence in it being built. I think the other reason is, I think also it's the capital. And that's also sorry, excuse me. That's also why I think I was like, yeah, this makes a lot of sense. We should be in the capital. We should be, where decisions are made, and it makes a lot of sense for actually our business. So yeah, I think those were kind of the main three reasons where when I saw it, I was like, this actually does make a lot of sense for us.
And when you said capital, you mean capital city of UAE, but access to capital, is there any benefits here for the access? Like, are there VCs here, or is it still up?
Yeah, there are. So I think, especially for me, a lot of the VCs are based in the UAE. So there's a lot of opportunities there as well in terms of raising. So I think definitely in terms of capital, in terms of also Abu Dhabi being more business centered. Obviously, it's also got tourism, but a lot of business happening here. I think that helps as well. Especially because like ADGM, sorry. And a lot of the different free zones here. I think that also helps with actually capital also coming to Abu Dhabi. There's also a lot of the government entities that are like leaders in AI and stuff here, like G42. So I think that also helps with also the talent. So like, for example, our the team leading our AI initiatives are ex-G42. It's like also like the talent actually is able to be almost employed, and also you basically move around.
So can you explain like what's G42?
Oh, G42 is like a government entity. Sorry, G42 is a government AI entity. So basically doing a lot of research and development and projects with the Abu Dhabi government and also with also companies as well. Nice. So a lot of very smart people, a lot of interesting projects. Yeah. So yeah, it's really interesting. And that's just one, by the way. There's a lot of different entities here working on AI, working on tech. So I think that also helps in terms of also, as we were talking about a bit earlier, like hiring and the actual ecosystem.
So and a lot of people have moved in, especially with the Ukraine war and between Russia and Ukraine. Like I think like 1 million people working in tech moved to UAE. So that's a quite of influx of talent.
Yeah, 100%. And you definitely see that on the employment market.
Wow. Okay. So what's next? Like, let's say we talk in 12 months. What's going to be with AudioMob? Like, what are you envisioning in terms of like your own, growth as a CTO, as well as the growth of the business?
Yeah, I think for us, it's definitely why we call ourselves AudioMob but not audio gaming, is that we definitely see, obviously we were gamers and we saw the pain point in gaming, but we see in other industries that there's a big opportunity there as well. So we definitely see ourselves expanding outside of gaming, like moving into apps, moving into other connected devices as well. Also like console, VR. There's a lot of interesting, I think, applications of audio advertising. But even beyond that, I think there's interesting opportunities in, for example, music discovery and audio discovery within games and apps. And that's something we've said, and podcast. There's a lot of interesting ways that we can actually use basically these devices as a way for people to engage and also be drawn in to new content and discover new things. And I think that's something that really interests us actually as a wider goal, even more than the audio advertising.
And about yourself, like personally, like what are you looking forward? I mean, you have your mentors for what, like almost a decade.
Yeah. I think for me, personal level is honestly just continuing the growth journey. I think I'm always looking to learn. I've always been someone, even as a kid, I always loved problem solving. So I think it's new challenges. It sounds really weird, but even new challenges in terms of what else is there to solve? What other problems are there that we need to address? What other cool initiatives, to be honest, that we can get stuck into. So I think for me, it's always the next challenge. It's always a new problem to solve. But I think also on a personal level is also, how can I also better grow as a CTO, a leader as well? I think it's really important to always invest in yourself, actually. And when I say invest, I don't necessarily mean time. I don't mean money. I also mean time. As well. So that's what I mean by like,
which is the much more expensive element as a founder. You don't have time. Huh. Awesome. Wilfrid, it was a pleasure having you on. Hope I get to talk to you in the next 12 months and see how you've evolved and how the company has evolved. It's always exciting to follow AudioMob's growth, because it's a new sector. And as I said, you're one of the companies trailblazing what audio ads can be, across, just overall. So thank you for coming on the podcast.
No, appreciate it. Good to see you.
Thank you, everybody, for listening.
You did it. You made it to the end of the episode. As a fan of the show, it would help us out if you'd subscribe and leave us a review on the podcast service of your choice. Those stars and likes, while a small action on your part, mean a lot to us and help to grow the show. More importantly, are you a member of the Deconstructor of Fun Slack group? If you have 5 years or more of games industry experience, go to deconstructoroffun.com/Slack and apply to join. Join the games industry best professional community filled with peers always willing to lend a hand, or subscribe to our newsletter to get all the latest insights from the Deconstructor of Fun content creators. Thanks for listening.